Hi, and welcome back to the Mom and Mind podcast, another episode of Behind the Sessions with me, your host, Dr. Kat. Today, I want to talk a little bit about why and how motherhood magnifies or can magnify anxiety and self doubt. Now, in a lot of the therapy sessions that I have with people, they're a bit blindsided as to how things that they dealt with before, meaning like anxiety or challenges, emotional difficulties that they had in their childhood, can be magnified during postpartum. And I'll get into a little bit more about what that means. But today I'm talking specifically about exploring patterns of anxiety or perfectionism that existed before parenthood, and how that can leave moms feeling like they aren't good enough during pregnancy or postpartum. And so often in my work with new moms, I see people who feel pretty consumed by what they think they should be doing, and so much so that they have a really hard time recognizing all the ways in which they are showing up and all the ways they are being a good or good enough parent, and some of the amazing things really that they're doing. Like the anxiety covers up and filters out the positive that is going on, that it just creates this really exhausting cycle of doubt. And they're constantly thinking that they should be doing something differently and they should be feeling a different way than they are. And some of this can come from pre existing patterns of anxiety. It's not always obvious to people that they have had anxiety prior to having a baby, if they did have anxiety. Sometimes it shows up during pregnancy or postpartum, and there's not really a whole lot to speak of beforehand. But for a lot of people, if they've had some level of anxiety their whole life, it might not register that that is anxiety that they've been experiencing. It could just be what they're used to, how they're used to being in the world, even though they might be able to speak to feeling worried about stuff, or that other people have told them they worry too much. It still might not register as being anxiety, not just occasional worry, but something that's kind of ongoing and pervasive, even if it's mild. It could more or less feel like they've just been managing kind of a background hum of stress or worry for years, whether that could be from really high expectations that they have of themselves or that other people have on them, or an internal drive to excel in everything that they do. It could potentially feel like some rigidity around things needing to be perfect, or perfectionism. And again, that doesn't always register as anxiety. It could just register for people that, well, yeah, I have high standards or things need to be done in a certain way. But how those patterns impact people can often be anxiety, worry, pressure, you know, thinking that they could be failing if they don't do things a certain way. So that's all could have been stuff happening prior to parenthood. Then enter parenthood. Um, Again, that could be during pregnancy or even during like a trying to conceive, fertility treatment process. And this can start at any point really along the journey to becoming a parent, and including the postpartum, because these are really vulnerable times. There's a lot of life change happening, a lot of transition, a lot of unknown. And there's, that I talk about often here, there's these other sort of free floating pressures around feeling like you should be able to do stuff. This is your child. This is your body. This is your whatever. You're meant to be, quote unquote, meant to be doing this. This is what your body is made for, blah, blah, blah. So that's an inherent, pressure and amount of stress. Well, then the reality kind of hits that you can't actually control everything. Things are not as predictable as you'd like them to be. You don't always know what your body needs, what your baby needs, how to attend to your body or your baby because it's not really a skill set that you've had to learn yet. And again, there's the pressure that somehow we're supposed to magically know how all of this stuff works. And that it's, if we're talking specifically about postpartum, that this child that you've been growing for however many months comes out into the world. You're the primary source of connection, the first source of connection. For some people, the primary source of feeding. And even if not the primary source of feeding, if you're bottle feeding, you might be the primary person to be doing the feeding, let alone changing diapers and all of these other tasks. So if your baby's upset or fussy or colicky or crying, and you have maybe gone through the list of all of the things you know how to do, and still they're not soothed, or they're continue to cry, or you can't figure out what's going on, then of course you're going to be more flustered and more upset, and um, feel concerned and worried that you can't figure out what they need. That their crying is potentially overwhelming, it's potentially overstimulating, and you're a caring parent, so you're trying to figure things out. So, in that context, when you're trying to figure things out, if in your past you have described yourself as somebody who has like a type A personality, or somebody that always gets stuff done, when you put your mind to something, you follow through, you can usually figure out solutions to things. But now you're in a situation where all of those things you used to be able to do are not really available to you, meaning you can't do them or do them as easily. It is kind of a natural side effect of that to start being hard on yourself, especially if you've already had a habit or pattern of being hard on yourself. Now you're in this high pressure situation. You might not know how to attend to all of these things, how to fix whatever problem you're dealing with, how to find solutions that your baby needs. So when you can't find those answers readily, then yeah, you might end up being hard on yourself. Let's add in now that you are exhausted. Um, you may have not had much sleep yourself. You are exhausted. You're going through the sleep deprivation, but also hormonal changes. You're going through a massive life change. You could be trying to navigate all of this with your partner, with your family. So you're having to negotiate relationships. Needless to say, you're going to be stretched pretty thin. And when your old coping strategies of, being able to put your head down and figure out solutions and do things and finish them, also while probably either pretending like you got it all under control or not letting anybody else know that you are worried about stuff or that you don't have things under control. Like, those old coping strategies may no longer feel effective. They may no longer be effective because you can't apply old coping strategies to new situations all the time. Sometimes you can. But what I find so often is this idea of should. I should, what moms are talking about this all the time. I should be able to figure this out. Why can't I just soothe my baby? Why can't I figure out what they need? And so when I hear that, I know that the pressure, the internal pressure, has been reignited and or magnified. Like, if this was something that somebody had already dealt with in their life, now they're not only dealing with themselves, now they're also dealing with the responsibility of taking care of a child and feeling the pressure of that. It's not a small pressure to take care of a pregnancy, to take care of a baby. There is inherently a lot of pressure in that. But we've really done a disservice to people. I talk about this a lot, about the pressures that we put on people without helping them understand that you might need to be learning a new set of skills, or hey, it might be good enough that you're getting through the day. You don't have to be a rock star. You don't have to be getting an A++. You don't have to get a gold star on every project you have. Especially when this is a brand new situation where you are learning how to be a mom, where you are learning how to be pregnant, where you are learning how to try to conceive a baby, especially as related to fertility treatments. It's already high pressure, high stakes. We just haven't yet figured out societally how to be easier on ourselves. And that's part of what we're talking about today. And so when we're talking about this, these really unrealistic standards that moms set for themselves, but that's backed by society. Society also sets these for moms, whether it's directly or indirectly. Often, those shoulds that I was just talking about are almost like a haunting them because it feels like they're chasing this standard that is really actually a setup. It's an impossible standard. Um, and there's really not a lot of wiggle room. Anyways, when you feel anxious, there's not a lot of wiggle room to really feel that what you're doing is good enough. You may be able to think it. You may be able to logistically use your reasoning to think to yourself, well, I know I shouldn't be this hard on myself, or I know I'm not supposed to know everything, but I still feel like I should. And it's really hard to negotiate with yourself or with the world in between those two things because they feel like opposites. I know I shouldn't know everything, and I feel like I should know everything. So it's a little bit of a bind, if not a lot of a bind, to feel stuck in. I hear it a lot in comparison. Like I see that other what like one of the things I hear a lot is that people saying I see that other moms are able to get stuff done in their house. They're able to figure out what their kids need. They're able to, go on about their day. Why can't I? I should be able to do that also. I've also talked a lot about the comparison game in these episodes. But what ends up happening is it just feels like a constant source of shame, maybe embarrassment, depending on the situation, that can sometimes end up resulting in, feeling like you're not a good enough mom, or you're not going to be a good mom. Like, for instance, if you feel like you can't help your baby to stop crying, how will you ever be a good mom? Well, part of the challenge here is that the anxiety plus sleep deprivation and all the other things are distorting reality. As I said before, when you're in this state of mind, you're filtering everything you see through anxiety, through your sense of shame, through the feeling of the inability to do something. So you may not be able to see that you actually are taking care of your child because the filter is blocking you from being able to see what is going well. It's like not allowing that to come through. Instead, it filters out for you all of the things that are quote unquote going wrong, even though they may not actually be going wrong. And so there is an emotional toll that it takes on new moms, new parents, when the shame, when the self-doubt, when all of that seems just ever present. It seems like it's all the time, every day failure, or incompetence, or um, judgment, whether it's from you, sometimes other people, unfortunately. It is really hard to function in that type of environment because there's nothing there to bolster you, and it can become so you know all consuming in your thoughts and your feelings that even getting reflection from somebody outside of the situation, like a partner or a friend or a family member, if they are offering you feedback like you're actually doing a really good job, um, it will be very hard to believe them. It can feel like well, they're just saying that because they have to, or I know I'm not really doing a good job, so I don't believe what they're saying. And so I want to offer this as a point of maybe stopping and reflecting. Like, how hard are you being on yourself? And is part of why you're feeling so hard on yourself because you are just in a really vulnerable time of life and things are hard. But things being hard and you feeling vulnerable does not mean or have to mean that you're not doing a good job or that you're failing. And vulnerability is going to be there because it is what happens in transitions when things are new, when we don't totally know what to expect, when we're learning new skills. But additionally, vulnerability is a part of being a parent because you care so deeply, because you want things to go well. But when that vulnerability meets perfection, it often can result in that a sense of shame. So, one of the reasons why I love therapy is because when moms come in and they're dealing with anxiety, they might not necessarily know how their past is impacting their present. That there could be kind of leftover patterns, things that they may have had to learn at a very young age how to cope by being perfect or trying to not upset anybody, trying to figure things out on their own because they didn't have somebody to go to that they trusted, or because there wasn't another adult around. Certainly, when kids grow up having to be the adult in the home, you have to grow up very quickly and learn how to just keep pushing forward, even though you might need parenting yourself. And therapy is a great place to explore this, because you can start to get a more compassionate understanding of how and why you might feel the way you feel. If you're feeling anxious or down or depressed, you can start to understand a little bit more of the why. And the why is important because then you can begin to develop your sense of self outside of the context of the coping skills you may have had to learn when you were younger. They may have served you very well at a young age, or throughout adolescence or early adulthood, but they might not be serving you anymore. It's like could have been a really specific skill set that you needed, but let's say now if you're in a loving or supportive relationship and you don't totally need that same sense of vigilance or worry or perfectionism, you can learn to think differently about yourself and release some of that pressure on yourself. And it's really beautiful when it can be explored in therapy. And I love, love, love when I can start to see the relief in people, when that starts to loosen for them. And so, some of the work in therapy, or even if you're in reflecting for yourself, is recognizing some of those patterns. Like if you notice that you tell yourself all the time that you should know how to do something, or you're hearing the word should in a lot of your internal dialogue, or if you notice that you do have the tendency towards perfectionism, that things need to be a certain way, and if they're not that way, then that means failure. Notice those thought patterns, notice those emotional patterns within yourself. And, a lot of the beginning work of therapy is just noticing that that's there, naming it, that, okay, that's the thing I do. That's the thing that my brain does. That's the thing I learned how to do when I was younger. And there it is, without judgment, ideally, with being able to have kind of an objective look, like you're looking at things for the first time, just like really trying to get a lay of the land. And then once you have that sense of understanding about yourself, you can start to reflect a little bit more. It stops being as much of a just a go-to and automatic that you think you should be doing something perfectly. you can have a little bit more space to ask yourself, are my expectations for myself realistic? Am I engaged in old patterns? Is this serving me anymore? How is this impacting my parenting journey? And if your answers to those things are like, yeah, man, this is not working for me. This does not feel good. This is not something I want to continue. Then we're getting somewhere. You're getting to a place potentially where you can start to change that internal dialogue by going from, yeah, I'm not doing good enough. I'm not a good mom, into I'm doing the best that I can with the resources I have, with the skill set I have, with the tools that I have. And the best that I can do right now is good enough. It really is. Another thing you might be able to do is practicing noticing things you are doing well, like how you respond to your baby when they need care, when they need love. The fact that you are engaging in caring activities, you're maybe changing diapers, you're rocking, you're trying to soothe them, just trying to figure out what's going on for them is an act of care, is you showing up for them. Even if you don't know the answer, you trying to figure it out is part of caring for them. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be that you know exactly what it is every time. Just you trying to figure it out is pretty cool. And hey, if they're crying and you're crying and y'all are just there rocking and crying together because, just waiting for this to pass and you're not quite sure what to do, that's also still caring for them. That's okay. If they are crying and you're at your absolute wit's end and you feel like you're going to scream because it's so overwhelming, and you set them down in a safe spot and go and like scream into a pillow or cry for a second, that's cool. You can do that. That is caring for you. That is caring for them. It's just not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. There are going to be hard times. How you interpret that, and if you can interpret what's going on outside of the filter of perfection and anxiety and shoulds, then you can start to get a clearer sense of how you're actually showing up. And maybe, just maybe, be able to inject in a little bit of self compassion. Like, yeah, nobody's perfect. I don't expect this of anybody else because I know that people aren't perfect. I mean, that is a reflection that you could have. It's very easy to normalize all of these struggles for other people. I mean, well, yes, some people are judgy, but if you, in your experience, saw somebody else going through exactly what you're going through, you would have compassion for them. You would be like, yeah, it is that hard. You would not tell them what you tell yourself when you're in your most judgy place. Like out loud, you would not say, yeah, you're really doing a bad job. You should get it together. Because when you know what it really feels like, you wouldn't say that. So, anyways, there's so much that could be explored in all of this that I really encourage you, if this is you, if this is something you identify with, to seek support, seek help from a therapist who understands the transition into parenthood, somebody who has training in perinatal mental health, who understands how um, some of your past experiences could be impacting your current transition into parenthood. It's definitely worth it, because when you can start to break up some of that tension, some of that anxiety, some of that judgment you have for yourself, it's so much easier to be present. It's so much easier to be the kind of parent you want to be, and ideally be relieved of the incredible amount of stress and emotional burden that comes with feeling all of this heaviness. So, for today, I just really want people to understand that if you have pre-existing patterns of stress or anxiety or depression, or anything along those lines that are being amplified in um, in your path to being a parent during pregnancy or during postpartum, it does not mean you're failing. If things become amplified and magnified and overwhelming, it does not mean failure. It is simply an indicator that something needs to be attended to for you, that you might need help, that maybe people around you need to step in and support you more, support the baby more, support the transition, support, having a new baby at home in a different way. But it doesn't mean failure. And furthermore, that you can get out of this. You can recognize patterns. You can challenge unrealistic expectations that you have of yourself. You can practice self compassion. And it's worthwhile. This is 100% worthwhile to relieve yourself of some of this overwhelm, this heaviness, this vigilance, this pressure that you have on yourself. Managing that in a different way, healing from that, is very worthwhile. And in addition to that, it's so important that you know that you're not alone in feeling the way that you feel, meaning that everybody struggles to some extent in the transition into parenthood. Not necessarily meaning that everybody has a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder, um, but lots of people do. And even if they don't meet criteria for depression or anxiety or OCD or whatever else might be going on, it doesn't mean they're not struggling in some way or that there's something they're having to figure out and overcome. And you might not be able to see that on the outside. You don't know really what other people's experience is. So please don't compare yourself to what somebody looks like on the outside, because you just never know what's going on internally. And I know you probably know that because you might be one of those people that is like holding it together on the outside, but on the inside might be really struggling. Anyhow, if you found this chat useful, helpful, supportive, insightful, anything like that, please share it with another mom, another parent, another family who might need to hear it. And of course, feel free to reach out to me. You can always email me at drcat@momandmind if you have thoughts about this episode or episodes like this, or if there are things you want to hear more about on the Mom and Mind podcast or on these behind the sessions episodes. I'd love to hear from you. As usual, follow, subscribe, ratings, reviews, all of that is very welcome and so helps the podcast progress and helps people find this resource. I thank you so much for being here. Until next time.